Over 720,000 sockeye have entered the Columbia River this year. Absolute insanity, absolute mayhem, basically like shooting fish in the barrel if you are in the right spots, utilizing the right techniques. This is a year to be reckoned with. It is at an all-time high over the last 4 or 5 years, and it has been an amazing season for people so far. I myself have yet to hit the Columbia River for sockeye, but that is all about to change. We are going on a 3-night journey next week to fish for nothing but sockeye. And once those limits are filled, we are going to travel up and down the river to try to get our hands on a couple of those upriver Chinook salmon. In today's video, welcome back to another walking on water tutorial-esque type video. We are going to talk about the 3 things I wish that I knew before I went to Brewster Pool to fish for sockeye salmon. Let's go. Sockeye salmon. What is a sockeye salmon? Where do they come from? And what the heck do we use to catch these amazing fish? A sockeye salmon, if you've ever fished for a fish called kokanee salmon, it is a landlocked sockeye salmon. And the reason a sockeye is because actually, unlike the kokanee, the smaller baby brother of the sockeye run to the ocean and spend time out there in the salt water and then travel back up the Columbia River and other rivers around the world. But in this video, we're talking specifically the Columbia River in Brewster Pool. They travel all the way back up the Columbia River, all the way to the Brewster Pool, waiting to traverse the Okanagan River up into Canada, where they're going to eventually spawn and then create babies so we have future fisheries in the future. And so, that Okanagan River, why are these sockeye in the Brewster Pool, and why don't they just travel up the Okanagan River to go spawn? Why do they sit there and let hundreds of boats a day target them before they go up to their spawning grounds? And the reason that those sockeye are in Brewster Pool and the reason they hang out around Brewster Pool is because the Okanagan River is actually too hot. Just like a kokanee, a sockeye has a deadly thermal barrier water temperature which they cannot pass through, or it will literally kill them. They will die in the water and they will never make it to their spawning grounds. A lot of people say, man, fish are actually super stupid. They might have small brains, but their instincts are bar none some of the highest of many animals that I've witnessed myself personally. You're capable of understanding, okay, this water is too hot, we can't swim through it, and as soon as that water cools down enough, those fish are going to be absolutely gone overnight. No more sockeye in the Brewster Pool, all because a half degree of temperature adjusted and those fish are able to shoot upriver to their spawning grounds. So that thermal barrier in the Okanagan River actually creates itself once that water temperature gets above 68 degrees. I've heard and I've seen reports of right now, the water temperature of the Okanagan River is sitting somewhere around 77 degrees. If you get online and you look at a Google Earth map of the Brewster Pool and the Columbia River, and then you look at the map as well where the Okanagan River flows into that Columbia River at Brewster Pool, you will notice that there is a severe difference in coloration in that water than you are seeing on the Columbia River. The Columbia River surface water temperature is sitting around 62 to 64 degrees currently, and those fish like to hang out fairly shallow in that water system just because the optimal water temperature is roughly around 54 to 55 degrees for a sockeye salmon, and so they're not really going to be super deep in that water system when you go up to the Brewster Pool to target these fish. But enough of the history lesson or the biology lesson of sockeye salmon. Let's get into the 3 things that I wish I knew before I went to Brewster Pool to fish. And these might be brain dead, stupid things for some people, but for the new guy heading up there, or just as a simple reminder to you guys, this might help you guys avoid some headaches, some heartaches, as well as possibly help you guys catch a lot more fish. So the number 1 thing that I wish I knew before going to Brewster Pool, this is a very intense combat fishery. And I don't mean intense in the aspect of once you're on the water, that you're going to be fighting with people. It's not going to be like Drano Lake 2024 like it was with some guy on the bank fish whacking another dude and all this crazy bullcrap. But it could easily turn into that scenario if you don't expect some of these things to be what they are. And I'm going to explain the first one right now. It is a combat fishery. There is simply only a boat ramp, if not a kayak boat ramp, along that area of land that stretches around Brewster, as well as the Okanagan River. And so when it comes to that, and you're talking about a combat fishery where hundreds of boats are loading themselves up with buddies and friends and they're all getting on the water, you need to make sure that you are down at the boat ramp extremely early. Being first on the water, yes, you're going to go out there and you're going to sit on the water until daylight hits, and yes, you have to wake up extremely early, but there's a couple pros to that, right? You're down there on the water extremely early, okay? That means you're first in the spot. You get your boat on the water successfully without having to wait in line for 2-3 hours, and then you're on the water, your gear set up. As soon as daylight hits, you're fishing, and you could potentially have your limit in the first 45 minutes. Now, that's not going to happen with everybody, of course. If you're using walking on water hybrid hoochies, I can only imagine that you will be limited out within that 45 minutes. Just kidding, guys. Little self-promo there. But as well as you're just going to avoid the overall headache of having to deal with thousands of people first thing in the morning, and you're going to find it a lot easier to launch successfully if you just wake up a little bit early. Now, not every day is the same. Not every single person is going to be out there every single day, the same days that you are. And obviously, the weekdays could potentially be a lot less busy than the weekends. And we've known that just by being alive on planet Earth. A lot of people work during the week and they don't work on the weekends. It's just simply how it goes. But this might be a stupid tip for you. But in my opinion, I did not know this the first few times I fished Brewster. And it was literally a nightmare. And then when I tried to fish it on my kayak and I used the kayak launch, it was a lot better. But I also waited till a little bit later in the day because I didn't want to deal with all of the people. But another little extra tip. It is going to be this week, while I'm going to be there, 105 degrees every single day. Okay? Bring ice, bring water, and make sure that you are getting your boat out on the water extremely early. This is the first thing that I wish that I knew was just understanding how many people actually fish this fishery. That's because all of those fish are literally stuck with that thermal barrier on the Okanagan River in the Brewster Pool. And so to avoid a giant mess, a giant catastrophe, avoid being that guy that is hitting somebody else with a frickin' fish whacker on the side of the bank because you didn't wake up early enough and you're pissed off that he's taken 10 minutes to launch his boat. Don't be that guy. Show up early, get on the water, and have an amazing time. That's the first thing that I wish that I knew. It would have saved me a lot of time during day 1 and day 2 of my trip, my very first trip a few years ago. And it is just a smart thing to do so you can be set up and ready to rock once that daylight hits. Next thing on the list, you guys, the number 2 thing that I wish that I knew before I went sockeye fishing, and that's simply, these fish act and react a lot like kokanee. A lot of people have kokanee fished, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that have sockeye fished, but I almost guarantee there's a lot more people that have kokanee fished than they have sockeye fished. And the reason that I'm making the correlation between kokanee and sockeye right now is simply because the setups that you are going to be running are almost going to be identical. The one thing that I think that I wish I knew the most was leader length when it came to sockeye fishing versus kokanee fishing. So the second thing that I wish that I knew before sockeye fishing was leader length and setup. And we're just going to talk quickly about leader length and setup for sockeye in the Brewster Pool. Now, you're not running the little 4-inch Dodgers. You're not running the little 5-inch Dodgers. You're actually using the 8 to 9-inch plus Dodgers, the Lure Jensen Double Ds, the Shasta Sling Blades, so on and so forth. We could talk about Dodgers for a long time, but they're not the little itty bitty ones. Now, you can get away with running the kokanee dodgers and you will catch fish, especially with the amount of fish that we have in the water up there right now. I mean, there's more fish than there has been in years up there right now. And so honestly, if you want to go out there and have a little fun, you could try a bunch of different things so you guys could better understand what's going to catch fish for you in the future. But in my opinion, you know, an 8 to 9 inch dodger is going to be the go-to key piece of ingredient for the dodger. And as well, when it comes to kokanee fishing, the reason I correlated it is because you run a really short leader. I love to run anywhere from an 8 to 10 inch leader for kokanee. A lot of people go with the double leader length of the dodger length itself. So if you have a 4 inch dodger, you run an 8 inch leader. If you have a 5 inch dodger up to a 6, obviously 5 is 10, 6 is 12, so on and so forth. But I'm going to cut right to the chase here, and I'm not going to waste any of your guys' time, and I'm just going to simply say, if it was me personally and I'm on the water and I had to run 1 leader length only, I would run an 11.5 inch leader length. A lot of people run 12, a lot of people run 10, some days they like 10, some days they like 12, but if you're catching fish and you've caught many a fish on that leader length before, there's no reason to change it. Now, a lot of times when I'm fishing for kokanee versus sockeye and I'm running a spinner, I like to run a 14 inch leader if I'm running a spinner, just because it's a little bit more erratic. It has its own action in the water, and the dodger gives it extra action, but I don't want it to give it that insane extra action because it already has a thump and a spinner blade rolling. But when it comes to sockeye salmon, I really like to run that 11.5 to 12 inch leader, regardless of what I'm running. It's the most consistent leader length that I've had fishing for sockeye. And now when I'm talking leader length, I run a double non-slip mooching rig at the bottom, 2 hooks at the bottom. I go from that top hook's eye of the hook, where you put the line down through, up to my dual lock snap, and that's exactly how I run everything that I run for sockeye. That is a 12 inch or 11.5 to 12 inch leader, and that is the second thing that I wish that I knew before I went to Brewster Pool and started sockeye fishing, and it's honestly helped put a lot more fish in the boat. Alright guys, so this video is going to be short and sweet. I'm not wasting any time today. Literally, the number 3 thing that I wish that I knew before sockeye fishing, which a lot of people, I'm talking, you would be surprised at how many people do not get this right. First of all, and I understand why a lot of people don't get this right, simply, it's summertime. You know what I mean? The season starts early July. Right now it's mid-July, and it's hot outside right now, and people are thinking, okay, these fish are frickin' deep in the water system and all the biters are going to be down deep, when all actuality, that surface water temperature is 62 to 64 degrees on the Columbia River because it is a flowing river, and it's a lot bigger of a body of water, unlike the Okanagan River that gets so hot because it's just so small and it warms up so fast. But these sockeye salmon are not extremely deep. And this is going to be kind of like a little bit of a twofer, like a 2-for-1, because we're going to talk about depth, but we're also going to be talking about what types of weights you should be using, just so you don't run into any problems like in scenario number 1, the first thing that I wish I knew before sockeye fishing. You don't want to get into a combat fishery and be the guy out there that's causing problems for everybody on the water. But these fish are not very deep, you guys. These fish are literally anywhere from the top 10 early morning down to about 30 feet deep at their deepest, in my opinion. And that's just me. Those are the 2 in-between depths that I fish all the time. And I'm very consistent and confident in those depths. And if I was going to go out there right now, even in mid-afternoon, I would honestly go and I would start at those points. Now, if you're not getting hit, maybe they are a little bit deeper because that sun is full sun up getting closer to the afternoon. And as you transition into evening time, those fish could be 5 or 6 feet deeper. But when you're starting out in the morning, the first thing that I wish that I knew was that these sockeye are not very deep in the water system. I'm going to run the 5-ounce cannonballs on my front rods because it's a heavier weight, and I'm going to run my 4-ounce cannonballs on my back rods. And the reason I do that is when I'm on a small boat and my buddy's coming with me this time, that's why we're running 4 rods, I like to have the heavier weight in front so I can run less line out so my back rods can have a little bit more line out and they don't get tangled with themselves. It's called a stack when you're stacking a boat with multiple rods, as well as it just gives you the possibility of fishing the same depths while not getting tangled with the same amount of weight. And I like to run my 5 ounces down to about 25 feet in the front 2 rods, and then on the back 2 rods, I like running my 4 ounces down to about 30 feet on the line counter every single time. That's just how I've been doing it, and I've found a lot of success in doing so. The reason that I said earlier, this correlates with the first thing that I wish I knew before I ever fished Brewster Pool for sockeye, is that you are in a combat fishery, and running 4 to 5 ounces, even 6 ounces, is great. And why is that so great? Because think about if you're running 2 ounces of lead out the back. You're like, well, I only need to run 2 ounces of lead to get down to 25 feet. Well, yeah, that's 100% true, but in a combat fishery, that's going to make your setback 40, 50, 60 feet back behind your boat, when if you're using 4 ounces, it's going to be 10 to 15 feet behind your boat, and you're not going to get tangled up with a bunch of other people. Because the last thing you want to do when you're trying to get quick limits of sockeye and move on to Chinook fishing, or just get off the water and go relax in the shade, is tangle up a bunch with a bunch of other boats, and then you got some guy that's pissed off because he's trying to do the same thing, and he pulls the fish whacker on you. And then you're on the beach, and he's whacking you, and next thing you know, everybody has their phones out, and you're that guy. So don't be that guy. Make sure you guys use the proper equipment for the fishery, as well as understand that these fish are not super deep in the water column. This will help you guys, in my mind. I hope that these 3 things that I wish I knew before I ever went to Brewster Pool to sockeye fish help you in any type of way. This is a very short and sweet, cut to the chase, just 3 things that I wish I knew before I went sockeye fishing at Brewster Pool. I hope you enjoyed it. We will see you guys in the Brewster Pool next week. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.